consequently life-wise. So, sure if I gauge how big a change and so on and so forth. So, yeah, that should do it.
Yeah.
Just like last time, just let me know whenever I go off.
Yeah, sure, I'll do it.
Okay. For now, let me turn the video off. A bit late, so I'd like to ask you, how long have you been teaching, etc., just to get a sense of, your experience.
For 4 months. Hello.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've been taking for 4th standard for 4 months.
You are teaching for
4th standard. I'm now currently joining for 6th standard.
Okay, but you have taught 1st standard.
Yeah, 4th standard.
4th standard. So how long have you been teaching?
For 4 months.
4 months. Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, that's just to to get a sense of where you are. Okay. Okay, thank you. So now, so let us recap a bit. One of those last few days with this board. Okay, so what we have let's do a quick recap. So one of the things we have talked about in terms of numbers, the first one was need, right? See, in upper primary and yeah, you can see in upper primary and middle secondary, I mean, you are past whole numbers, so the counting aspect, all those things are gone. So fraction also you have started kind of, but still it doesn't hurt to ask let's say bug students with these questions. For integers and rational numbers and so on and so forth, it's actually important because this is where it becomes too mathsy and you don't necessarily need this stuff in real life. So it helps to tell this to students or quench their curiosity or whatever on what are these things doing in the syllabus, why do we need to bother about them at all, etc., etc. So it's a good idea to look into the needs, and as we mentioned, there are two kinds of needs. One is the need in life, and two, the mathematical need. In life need can be split in two parts, daily life and certain professions. Okay, and basically as you go into more and more sophisticated things, the priority goes like this. Okay, there is greater amount of mathematical need, etc., compared to daily life needs. I mean, in daily life, why and how will you need square root? Okay. In India, mathematics developed quite a lot, and we had discovered Pythagoras' theorem along with proof. It was a proof without word. It was a more visual proof. And that came because we used to do all these pujas and stuff like that. And for that, we had to, build the Vedi in a particular shape with a lot of precision. So that necessitated it. Okay. So that kind of a little history or something, it's a good idea to get them, where it came from. Now, I am not a history person. I am still allergic to history despite many things. So I can't tell you too much about the history of how things originated, but it's a good idea to, tell children and get them to understand where these things are, why these things are there, etc. The second thing is, I'll put them all together, meaning making, rules and conventions. Okay, this is very important. Okay, see, I gave one example, right? When you write mixed fraction, so then you are putting a 2 and a 1/3 together, and the meaning is that you are adding them. Whereas if you have 5y, that means 5 times y. Okay, and of course, if you have a 34, that is 3/10 plus 4. So very different stuff. Okay, so rules and conventions have to be made very, very clear, because otherwise you end up getting this kind of problems where half plus half becomes 2/4. Okay, because then you are blindly doing symbol manipulation without having understood anything. Okay, you see 1 and 1, there's an addition sign, add them, 2 and 2, add, that's it, right? And we don't definitely want to avoid this. So that is why, this is very, very important, this rules and conventions, and be very clear on what part is rule and what part is convention. See, for example, when we write fraction, we have to have 2 numbers, right? There's no way we can shrink it to 1 number. So we have, let's say, 3/7. And you know that 3/7 is not the same as 7/3. So in other words, this is nothing but an ordered pair. Now we associate ordered pair only when we go to the graph, coordinates of points, right? But this is also an ordered pair. If you can think of it as 3 and 7, where the ordered pair is basically numerator, denominator. Okay. Similarly, when you think, so how we write this ordered pair, that part is a convention. We could have written it as 3 straight line 7. We often write it as 3/7 like this also. Okay. On the other hand, if you are talking about exponents, let's say we want 2 to the power 5. Now that is 32. Whereas 5 to the power 2 is 25. So clearly these two are not equal. Now this is again an ordered pair. So in this case, the ordered pair 2, 5, let's say 2 to the 5, 2 to the 5, that 2, 5, that is basically base and index. Okay. Similarly, when you get to surds, you can think of, let's say 4th root of 6. Again, it will be an ordered pair of 6 and 4, where it will be base and, I don't know, the root, which root you are talking about. So there are these ordered pairs that show up, and we don't often recognize that these are all cases of ordered pairs, all having different meanings and stuff. And we need to spend some time on meaning making and things like that. Also, usually from this exponent part, numbers and algebra mingle a lot together. Okay. So, and there you basically use the language of algebra to generalize. When you write a to the n, you know, you are capturing all possible bases and all possible indices, so to speak. So that is also there. Now, I haven't looked into the algebra part, but I'm fairly sure in class 6 and 7, especially in class 7, you do deal with x square plus 3x minus 2 kind of polynomials, right? For the state board. Can somebody just verify this? Somebody who has taught 6, 7 for in Udavi school. Okay, somebody needs to unmute and respond.
This whole batch, most of the people are new to each standard. The old people who are teaching are all put to different places.
So nobody has any experience. Okay. So we need to take a look at the algebra portion, because algebra is nothing but a generalization of numbers. Okay. So see, if you are coming into polynomials and your polynomial involves the x square or x cube, then you need to know what is x square, right? What does this notation mean? And it is quite possible that they have, you know, in the state syllabus, they have dealt with squares in particular, cubes in particular. Okay. But this is where we need to check if the syllabus is a bit consistent. Okay. So that needs to be looked into.
Yes.
Okay.
So I think whoever is in charge for 6th and 7th can respond to this question after looking at it.
Yeah. Okay. See, because in the NCERT textbook, they are fairly consistent about this across the board. Okay. So they will introduce square and then go to, you know, x square, then go to a square, a plus b whole square, and all those things. Similarly, you know, they will get to cube. Now, practically speaking, you don't need to go beyond cube too much. Okay. And where do you need the cubes and squares? Especially in mensuration. When you are calculating area, you run into squares a lot, right? So that is where you definitely need to, you know, discuss squares. And then you need to discuss cube when you get into volume. Okay. So, so that's where, you know, you can kind of see the connection, the need arising out of the syllabus, etc., all of that. But x to the power 4, x to the power 5, those kind of things, again, they become mathematical needs, so to speak. Okay. No, there is one place where you can still connect it to them. Remember, we talked about compound interest. So when you do compound interest, that is where you get into higher powers. So you have a certain principle and you are getting a certain rate of interest, and then you want to see what happens to the money after, let's say, 4 years, 5 years. So that n basically tells you the time, right? Or maybe t. Okay. So that is where your need for higher powers kind of come in. So that's how you can, you know, bring in the need that why do we need higher powers? Okay. So economics, I mean, physics, we all know physics uses a lot of mathematics. Economics also does require a lot of mathematics. Another thing requires, and it may sound strange, and that is politics, democracy, in fact. I mean, how you figure out numbers, there's a lot of number crunching that is involved. Okay, but and it also requires a lot of fractions, but that's not something that Indian school syllabus includes too much, but it's quite interesting and fascinating. So anyway, okay, so once we are done with this part, need, meaning making, especially the rules and conventions part, then comes to, and in meaning making, it's a good idea to use some kind of visual model. Visuals, models, visuals can come from manipulatives, or models. Okay? But ideally, it should not be something static. It should have something that where you do something. So with manipulatives, you can create different numbers, etc. When you are, even with a model, if it is number line, pointing out where are different things. Now, this is where I wanted to mention something. Monday I had mentioned that you have these constructions probably in class 7, where you have a line segment and you are taught how to divide it in exactly 3 equal parts, or 5 equal parts, or 7 equal parts, etc. Similarly, later on in 9-10, you have constructions, of course, based on Pythagoras, where you can draw, say, root 15. Okay, and there may be more than one way to draw it, or root 3 or root 5. These are all constructible numbers. Okay, now, so when we get, so all rational numbers, because a line segment, if this is a line segment of, say, unit length, so this is 0, this is 1. So this is going to be 1/3, this is 2/3. Okay, and similarly you can go on the negative side also. So all rational numbers are taken care. Now when you are able to draw root 3, root 5, etc., that takes care of all square root, all numbers involving square root. So for example, golden ratio, that involves square root. Okay, so those kind of things you can draw. You can draw precisely. Let me give you an example of how precise. Okay, you remember that scaling model that I had shared with you on GeoGebra? So in that, you can actually draw root 5. Root 5 construction is quite simple. You draw a rectangle. So this is 1 and this is 2, right? So by Pythagoras, this diagonal is going to be 1 square plus 2 square, and then you take the square root of that, so root 5. Okay, so that's how you can draw root 5. Now, you can actually try it out on a dot sheet. So this is the 0 of the vertical number line.
Swati, your board is going too low.
Okay. So let me erase this. So did you get how to draw root 5? This will work. Okay. So
now it's better.
Okay. So here we have root 5. Diagonal of a 1/2 rectangle. Okay. Now, let's say we have we have this vertical number line, and there is the 0 and there is the 1, and through 1 we draw the horizontal number line, and you can kind of guess that root 5 is between 2 and 3. It's more than root 4, okay, which is 2, and less than root 9, which is 3. So it will be somewhere here, okay. So this point is, let's say, root 5, okay, and you want to multiply it with root 5, okay. So let's get a root 5. So this is 2, and so somewhere here is root 5, okay. So when you get here, it actually turns out to be exactly 5. You can do it on dot sheet, and of course you can do it on GeoGebra also, but doing it on a proper dot sheet makes a hell of a difference, okay. So this way you can see, when you are taking root 5 and you are scaling it by a factor of root 5, you are getting 5, okay. So that was quite exciting when I did it first time. And you can actually draw and do that for anything involving square root. But if it is not square root but cube root, you can't draw it anymore, okay. So what happens is, we have this set of rational numbers, okay, that's usually denoted by a Q with a little line, and then there is this set of real numbers, which is R. Now in between there are two sets which may be of importance, okay. This immediate set is constructible numbers, so root 2, root 3 plus root 7, all these kinds of things, okay. So these are called constructible numbers. So you can precisely, exactly construct them and play around with that. For example, if you construct root true, the actual geometric construct, on GeoGebra, and then you zoom in where it intersects the number line, you can see how it is between 1 and 2, between 1.4 and 1.5, between 1.41 and 1.42, and you can kind of zoom in again and again and all. So that's kind of quite interesting, okay. Now after this guy, this constructible numbers, okay, there is another set which is what I will call real algebraic numbers. Algebraic numbers are basically roots of equations with integer coefficients. Now you can understand that integer coefficient takes care of rational coefficients also, because if you have rational coefficients, I mean, an equation will have finitely many terms, right? So you can find the common denominator of all the coefficients, and then you can take the LCM of all the denominators and then multiply both sides by that. So then you get rid of all the denominators, and you have integer coefficients. So if you have any such equation with integer coefficients, then the roots of that are called algebraic. Now, sometimes those roots become complex number. They are not real number. For example, x square plus 1 equal to 0. Okay. If you have x square plus 1 equal to 0, 1 is greater than 0, right? And x square, any square is 0 or more, right? So something which is 0 or more plus something which is more than 0 is strictly positive. So it cannot be equal to 0. So we don't have a real solution for x squared plus 1, right? Equal to 0. So that is why the set of algebraic numbers includes complex numbers and imaginary numbers. So what we mean by real algebraic numbers are, you know, the algebraic numbers which are also real numbers. Okay. So anything like all the surds and all the numbers you can get by multiplying, dividing, adding, subtracting, two surds, etc. Two surds or surds and rational numbers, all those combinations, they all form real algebraic numbers. So cube root of 2 will come here. Now our friend pi is beyond this. So pi sits outside here. Okay. Now we talked about countability and stuff. So rational numbers are countable, and I will show you how. This set of constructible numbers again is countable. Real algebraic numbers again is countable, and you don't have to believe me, I will prove it to you. But after that, when we get to this pi, these are called transcendental numbers, and they are the ones that make real number uncountable. Okay. So usually we don't talk, we go directly from rationals to irrationals, but there are some layers in between, and in which the constructible numbers are kind of linked to the syllabus because they can be constructed. And it's a very typical 10th standard question, construction problem, that draw root 15 or construct root 15 or something like that. Construct root 37. Okay, these are very standard questions. So it's explicitly not mentioned as constructible numbers, but the whole notion is there. Okay. So we'll get to that. Now, once you establish need, meaning making with all the rules and conventions and some level of visuals, then when it comes to playing around with them, that is comparing, addition, subtraction, multiplication, division, that is where try to problematize as much as possible. Okay. Now they already know what these numbers mean. They should know that. Okay. Help them get there if they're still unclear. They know what the meaning of this operation is or what it means to compare. Now let them figure it out using any of the visual models, etc. Okay. So that is what typically should happen. And this is what you should do when you are starting off, when you are introducing something for the first time. Okay. Instead of making it prescriptive, this is the rule, this is how you add two rational numbers. Ask them, okay, so here it is. Okay, this is the meaning. You know, do it on the number line if necessary. So if you are adding two rational numbers on number line, say a positive and a negative. So the positive will go something like that. Then the negative will start from here and maybe go like this. So what is the resulting sum? Now, with some discussion, they should be able to figure out that this is the sum. So this is the thing that you need to find out. Now problematize how it can be done. Okay. Maybe start with rational functions, like rational numbers, like say 3 by 7 and the pink one as negative 5 by 7. Okay, and see if they can make sense out of this. So in this case, you can divide each one into, 1/7. Okay, so you go 3 steps, 3 1/7 steps forward and go negative. So you go 5 1/7 steps backward, and you end up with negative 2 by 7. Okay, so try to do as much meaning making as possible. Okay. However, when you are teaching in the higher classes, you do not have this choice. Okay, you may not have this much time. So then you need to figure out what is it that the student hasn't understood and address that. Okay, so that part I'm going to depend more on you. Like you raised various issues and questions. So, bring them out and then, we can discuss them. That part cannot be discussed out of the blue. Okay. Okay. Now I just spilled a massive amount of tea, so I need to empty my pockets a bit. Okay, I'll be right back. Okay. Okay. So now, any questions so far? Okay. Now I'm going to show you a video, and this is on the Hilbert Hotel. And then I'm going to connect it to the various number sets. I need screen sharing opportunity.
Shiva sir, you need to enable screen sharing.
Yeah.
It's not done yet. Shiva, if you make me the host, then it might work.
Try now. Is it?
Okay, let me check. No, not yet. Host disabled participant screen sharing. That's what it says.
Sundar?
Hello.
How to change the host?
Or can you help?
Swati, now you are host. You can share.
Yeah.
Yeah, Shivappa. हाँ तो आप आ जाइए अब मैं लैब में हूँ, आप आके बॉक्स रख के जाइए. ओके. Okay, I see that you have made me host now, so yeah. Okay. Play. Okay.
Swati, there's no sound.
Oh.
Yeah.
Okay, so hang on, let me go to the beginning. Yeah.
In the 1920s, the German mathematician David Hilbert devised a famous thought experiment to show us just how hard it is to wrap our minds around the concept of infinity. Imagine a hotel with an infinite number of rooms and a very hard-working night manager. One night, the infinite hotel is completely full, totally booked up with an infinite number of guests. A man walks into the hotel and asks for a room. Rather than turn him down, the night manager decides to make room for him. How? Easy. He asks the guest in room number 1 to move to room 2, the guest in room 2 to move to room 3, and so on. Every guest moves from room number n to room number n plus 1. Since there are an infinite number of rooms, there is a new room for each existing guest. This leaves room 1 open for the new customer. The process can be repeated for any finite number of new guests. If, say, a tour bus unloads 40 new people looking for rooms, then every existing guest just moves from room number n to room number n plus 40, thus opening up the first 40 rooms. But now, an infinitely large bus with a countably infinite number of passengers pulls up to rent rooms. Countably infinite.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, so now think about this. Initially, all the rooms are labeled 1, 2, 3, 4, etc., etc. So that's the set of natural numbers. Okay. Now the new number that comes in, this guest, is essentially 0. Okay. So now you make a new list where the first number on the list is 0, then it is 1, etc., etc. So the first element, E1 of the list is 0, second element E2 of the list is 1, E3 is 2, and like that. So think of this E1, E2, E3 are as the rooms in the hotel. Okay, so 0 occupies room 1, 1 occupies room 2, 2 occupies room 3. In general, n occupies room n plus 1. Okay. So this is where the integers come in. Okay. This new bus of numbers is like the integers. So now your list becomes 0, -1, 1, -2, +2, and like that. And I mean, this is one way of looking at it, or you can look at it this way also. 0, 1, -1, 2, -2, 3, -3, 4, -4, like that. And you can make a list of all integers. Okay. So that is why they are also countable. Okay. The whole notion of countable is that you can make a list, which in other words is like in the Infinite Hotel, they have some room. Okay. Because the Infinite Hotel, the rooms are 1, 2, 3, 4, etc. all the way, right? In a more mathematical term, it is a one-to-one onto correspondence between the set of natural numbers and anything else. Okay. So this is very, very counterintuitive, because the set of natural numbers is definitely a proper subset of the set of whole numbers. Okay. The whole number has one extra element, but still it turns out that, you know, they have one-to-one onto correspondence. Okay. Similarly, the set of integers is clearly a larger set in some ways, in the sense of subset, superset. It's a larger set than the set of whole numbers or the set of integers or the set of natural numbers. However, if you try to do a one-to-one onto correspondence, you can match every integer to every natural number. Okay. So that's what is going on. But here the fun gets more intensive.
Word spreads about this incredible hotel. People pour in from far and wide. One night, the unthinkable happens. The night manager looks outside and sees an infinite line of infinitely large buses, each with a countably infinite number of passengers. What can he do? If he cannot find rooms for them, the hotel will lose out on an infinite amount of money, and he will surely lose his job. Luckily, he remembers that around the year 300 BCE, Euclid proved that there is an infinite quantity of prime numbers. So to accomplish this seemingly impossible task of finding infinite beds for infinite buses of infinite weary travelers, the night manager assigns every current guest to the first prime number, 2, raised to the power of their current room number. So the current occupant of room number 7 goes to room number 2 to the 7th power, which is room 128. The night manager then takes the people on the first of the infinite buses and assigns them to the room number of the next prime, 3, raised to the power of their seat number on the bus. So the person in seat number 7 on the first bus goes to room number 3 to the 7th power, or room number 2187. This continues for all of the first bus. The passengers on the second bus are assigned powers of the next prime, 5. The following bus, powers of 7. Each bus follows powers of 11, powers of 13, powers of 17, etc. Since each of these numbers only has 1 and the natural number powers of their prime number base as factors, there are no overlapping room numbers. All the bus's passengers fan out into rooms using unique room assignment schemes based on unique prime numbers. In this way, the night manager can accommodate every passenger on every bus, although there will be many rooms that go unfilled, like room 6, since 6 is not a power of any prime number. Luckily, his bosses weren't very good at math, so his job is safe. The night manager's strategies are only possible because while the infinite hotel is certainly a logistical nightmare, it only deals with the lowest level of infinity, namely the countable infinity of the natural numbers 1, 2, 3, 4, and so on. Georg Cantor called this level of infinity Aleph 0. We use natural numbers for the room numbers as well as the seat numbers on the buses. If we were dealing with higher orders of infinity, such as that of the real numbers, these structured strategies would no longer be possible, as we have no way to systematically include every number. The real number infinite hotel has negative number rooms in the basement, fractional rooms, so the guy in room 1/2 always suspects he has less room than the guy in room 1, square root rooms like room radical 2, and grasp of a concept as large as infinity. Maybe you can help tackle these problems after a good night's sleep, but honestly, we might need you to change rooms at 2 a.m.
Okay, now, oops. Now, let me turn on video. And yeah, you can see what I have written on the board. Yeah, okay. Now, this whole infinitely many buses, each containing infinitely many passengers, is very like fractions. You can think of each bus has a number. You can think of that as the denominator of those fractions. And you can think of the passengers as the numerators. Like each passenger has a number, okay? The seat in the bus. And the seat number is basically the numerator, okay? So the bus number is denominator and seat number is numerator, okay? So that kind of takes care of all the passengers. So that means if you look at what I have written on the board, each row basically is of the passengers from one bus, right? And you know, column wise you can get the seats. Okay. So one way you can take care of all the fractions is this. You go one to the left, then you go diagonally down, then you go straight down, and then you go diagonally up. Now this 2 by 2 is already something you have, it's already there. So just strike it off, go to the next one, okay? And then you just continue that way. Okay? And again, this 2/4 is already taken care of, so cross. Move to the next one, already done, already done. This one. Okay, so this way, as you move through the whole, you know, 2 by 2 infinite array, you basically capture every element. Yeah, there are duplicates, you ignore and move on. Okay, so this way, you can see that you can list out every single fraction. So even though the set of fractions is a dense set, there is no minimal gap between any two fractions. There is a way to list all of them. Okay. Now, some people don't like this too much because when you list out the natural numbers and whole numbers, you do get a sense of, you know, which one is bigger than which one, etc. If you list out integers also, you still retain that sense to some extent. But when you list out the fractions this way, that is completely lost. Okay. But then that's not the problem here. The problem was to show, can all fractions be listed? And yes, all fractions can be listed. And then just the way you went from whole numbers to integers, okay? Similar way you can create a new list. So if the original list is, let's start with 0, 0, 1. Now this is not visible. Okay, now I think you can see it. Okay, if this is the original list, 0, 1, 2, half, 3, 4, 3 by 2, 2 by 3, 1/4, etc. When you bring in this includes all positive rationals and 0. Now, if you want to expand it to all rationals, you can go 0, 1, -1, 2, -2, half, -half, 3, -3, 4, -4, 3/2, -3/2, 2/3, -2/3, and so on. So that way you have captured all rational numbers. Okay, no problem. Is this part clear?
Swati, can you explain what is mean by one-to-one and on-to set? Why we are doing this?
Okay, so one-to-one means that from, okay, let's say, okay, so let the let me clear that. Yeah. Okay, so suppose there are two sets and there is a function, a map, you're mapping from the set A to B. Okay, so when you have, okay, yeah, yeah. So if you have for one-to-one, you will have f of x. If you have two elements, x and y in A, then x and y will go to different places in B. So this is B, this is A. Okay, they will not go to the same thing. See, for example, when you square numbers, square integers, that is not one-to-one because √3 and 3 both go to 9. Right? So that's not one-to-one. Whereas if you do cube, if you cube a function, cube a number, that is one-to-one. Okay? Because no two cubes are the same. I mean, -3 goes to -27, 3 goes to 27. So no problem that way. Okay? So this is one-to-one. Okay? Onto will be that every element here is mapped to some element here. So there is nobody here who doesn't have a pre-image here. Okay? So that is the onto part. So if you think of this as all squares, okay, let's again take the square example. So this is, let's say this is all integers. Okay, and or let's say this is all of real numbers. This is real line. Okay, set B. And set A is also real. Now, if you do again a square function, if this function is square function, then the negative numbers here won't have a pre-image, right? So square again is not going to be onto. However, cube root will work because every number has a cube root. Okay, even the negative ones you will be able to find a cube root. Okay, so that's the difference. Is that part clear?
The bottom part.
Oh, sorry. So for onto, if both the sets A, B, both the sets are real number, and you are doing a square function from one to the other, then in the second set, the negative numbers that are there, say for example -4, this is not matched to anything here, anything in the first set. Okay, so therefore the square function is not an onto function because there are some things here which doesn't get mapped. On the other hand, the cube function will be a proper one. So you can find cube root of -4. So that matching is still possible. We are talking about real numbers, so it will not be a rational number, but doesn't matter. There's still a real number, you know, which when cubed gives you -4.
Okay. Sorry, one more question. So
Yeah.
right now we are going to match all the fraction or the integer to which set? It's a natural number set or a real number set? So we are writing every numbers in a list, right? List format. So we need to make it into onto y domain, right? Like on to one.
Right now, what I'm talking about is for you. You do not need to take this to the students. This is for you to understand.
Okay.
Okay? Everything that we will discuss here is not necessarily for the student. But see, when you're teaching, you need to know a little bit more than what exactly is there in the syllabus. So this is not necessarily for the classes that you take. You do not have to teach this back to students. If you are lucky to have a more curious child in your class who asks a lot of questions, okay, then maybe this kind of things will help, but not in general.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
You can look into NCERT, I believe class 11-12 math textbook, where they talk about functions and they do talk about one-to-one onto. Okay. So feel free to read up a little bit, you know, maybe 1 or 2 chapters there, and they will have tons of examples, etc., to make it clearer if you are interested.
Yeah, I have watched this video also. So my confusion is we are mapping a certain set of number to a certain set of number, right? What is the another set which we are mapping to?
So when we are talking about countable numbers, one set to which we are mapping, set B, is always natural numbers.
Okay.
Set B is always natural numbers, okay, which is nothing but 1, 2, 3, etc., etc.
Okay.
Okay, the A can be different. So first, initially A was natural numbers, all the rooms were already occupied, right? Then
Yes.
one guest came, that was 0. So then then A became whole numbers. Then one boss of infinitely many guests came, that made the set integers. So so you can think of B as the set of rooms, natural numbers, and A as the set of guests who are coming and getting put in the rooms.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yeah. And then when these infinitely many buses came, each containing infinitely many guests, that can be considered, you know, rational numbers, fractions, and later on even up to algebraic numbers. So I was just going to go into that part of algebraic numbers. How can we think of that as, you know, infinite buses and infinite, each containing potentially infinite many people. Okay, so let me build that up. Okay, I'll move to another part of the board and clear it up. Okay, let's take some charts. Yeah. Okay. Now, if you think about the real, okay, let's see if this is visible. Okay. If you think of real algebraic numbers, right, they are nothing but roots of equations, right? Now, so each equation has finitely many roots. Right? Okay. Now, so this is a countable set. Okay. Now you consider for a given degree. So each equation can be written as a polynomial equal to 0, right? Now each polynomial has a definite degree. Okay. So let us fix the degree. Let us say that we take, let's for example take n equal to 3. Okay. So then you have a set of equations which are, this will be not quadratic, but the next one, cubic equations. Cubic equations, right? So these equations will be look like ax cube plus, okay, maybe so below, ax cube plus bx square plus cx plus d equal to 0. Okay. So this is basically, so to describe this equation, you need this set of ordered numbers. Okay. And for each A, B, C, D, you will have 3 possible roots, not more than 3. Right? So if you look at all possible A, B, C, D, etc., and all the roots, so this is a countable collection. Okay? Because there are countably many A's, countably many B's, countably many C, countably many D. These are all integers. Okay? And each will give you countably many sets. So whenever you have a countable collection of countable sets, that still becomes countable. Because you remember, those infinite buses, each having infinite, and these infinities are countable infinities. The hotel manager was able to pack everybody in, right? So if we consider, so it can definitely pack in all the roots of one equation. It can pack in the roots of any such equation with that kind of degree, right? Now, n equal to 3 was chosen arbitrarily. The same thing will work for any degree. So, for each degree, you have a countable collection of numbers, which are algebraic numbers. And as I said, there can be repetitions, but we have seen how the repetitions can be taken care of. So, the total collection of real algebraic numbers is basically a countable collection of countable sets of countable roots, if I put it that way. So this gives you the roots of one equation. So roots of one equation. This is the collection of all equations of given degree. And this is all possible degrees, right? So you can have the equations will be, I mean, 0 degree won't work, right? Then it's not an equation at all. 1 degree equations, something like ax plus b equal to 0, that will basically be all the rational numbers. Then you get ax square plus bx plus c equal to 0. And you use the square, the Sridharacharya formula for the roots of quadratic equations, that actually will generate all possible constructible numbers. Okay, not all possible constructible numbers, but you know, basically it will be all constructible numbers. There may be more. Okay, and then as you go into the cubic, etc., you get other roots. So this all possible degrees, this is nothing but the set. I would say this is just the set of natural numbers. Okay, so this is one way you can label the buses. And then for each bus, you have, you know, what are the possible equations you can get. And maybe if you imagine the bus to be, you know, very, very large in both ways, you know, number of rows and how many seats per row, right? So this can probably give you each equation can be one row in the bus. And then the number of seats in each row will be occupied by the roots of that equation. So that is how you can think of all real algebraic numbers. And you basically kick out any root that is not real, which has an imaginary part. So you kick them out of the bus. And yes, there are roots which are sitting in 2 places possibly. So for example, 2x plus 6 equal to 0. So this row will be occupied by the number -3. And suppose you also have another equation, x square minus plus 4x plus 3 equal to 0. Then the seats corresponding to that will be occupied by -3 and -1. So you can see that -3 is occupying 2 seats. So yeah, I mean, again, you can ask them to, those numbers to occupy just 1 seat and leave the next seat vacant. So just like we did for fractions. So that way, you can capture all possible numbers that arise out of solving equations with integer coefficients only. So still gives you a countable set. And then comes these real numbers, these numbers like pi, etc. Okay, why are they not countable? So let's talk about that. But that in the short time we have left. Okay, so this is where we take help of decimal notation. Okay, one small thing here, you see, you know that those who are teach class 9, 10 in particular should know this. If you have an irrational number, then the decimal representation is non-terminating, right? Now, if you have a rational number like say 1/3, then it is 0.3333 and it goes on forever. And that's also non-terminating, right? But of course it is recurring, and for irrationals it is not going to be recurring. Okay. Now, if you instead have 1 by 5, now that's 0.2 and it stops. Okay, the thing is that instead of stopping, you can write it as 0.1999999 goes on forever. So you can express this also as a recurring decimal. Okay, that is, this happens because 0.9 recurring is nothing but 1. When I was a child, this came around class 6 or 7. And while I could logically see why that is happening, it bewildered me for quite some time. Okay, and it was like, wow, it's so counterintuitive. Okay, so I don't know where it comes in for you guys. You can check that, but it's quite fascinating. Okay, so now if you, let's look at just this interval 0 to 1. Okay, so all numbers that are strictly between 0 and 1. So all of these numbers can be written as 0 point something something something. 3, 4, 0, 2, 9, 5, 7. Okay. The next number can be written as 2.0913, 2. And the next number can be 0.4135. Okay, like that. Let us assume, this is a proof by contradiction. So let us assume that all numbers between 0 and 1 can be listed. Okay, so there is a way to fit all these numbers, all numbers that are between 0 and 1 in that Hilbert hotel. So each can be assigned a room. Okay, and here the order doesn't matter. Now let us construct a new number. Okay, so what we know, we start with 0. Okay, and we look at the first number. This is 3. We replace the 3 by some other number, not 9, but some other number. Now we look at the next one. The second digit after decimal is 9. So we replace it by, let's say, 7. Now we look at the third one. Okay, that again turns out to be 3. Okay, so let's put it as 4. And that's how we construct this new number. Okay. Now very clearly this new number is a number between 0 and 1. So it should be in the list, right? Because we have assumed all numbers between 0 and 1 can be listed. So this fellow has a certain room, but let's figure out which room. So if he goes to room 1, you see the first digit doesn't match. Goes to second room, second digit doesn't match. Room 3, third digit doesn't match. So this way, in whichever room this number goes, whichever place in the list this number goes to, there is no room for it. Because if it goes to the nth place in the list, the nth digit will be different from the, the nth digit of the number that is already there. Okay. So this poor fellow, the one that we constructed, it is very much a number between 0 and 1, but it has no place in the list, right? So you can see that there is a contradiction. So that is why all these real numbers between 0 and 1, they become a different kind of a higher level of infinity, which is uncountable infinity. I had shared with you a video of Hart, Victoria Hart. She basically talks about this thing in her video. Okay, so you can take a look at that. She does it in a very nice, colorful way. Obviously, I can't do that good of a job. So just thought I would share that with you. Okay. Now, one question I'm going to leave you with, and that is, there are two parts to the question. Part one is actually easy. So even if you are teaching class 6, you should be able to answer that. Or you may. Here's one thing. If you can't see the board, if you mention that in the chat, that's not going to help because I cannot keep track of the chat and the board simultaneously. You have to unmute yourself and tell me I can't see the board. Okay? Please do that from next time. I think Sundar already does it, but if any of you, see that, please don't use the chat for that. It's humanly not possible to, track both. So I hope, Madhavan, that I adjusted the board and you were able to see it.
Little slide. Only.
Hello?
Yeah, I can.
Was that taken care of? Maddie, I can't hear you, Madhavan.
Yeah, turn little bit.
Yeah, but right now I'm not talking about anything in the board. I'll turn it. Let's see.
This.
Yeah.
This is fine.
Kind of, yeah. Okay. So the first question, which is an easy question, reason or proof that every rational number either becomes a terminating decimal or is a repeating non-terminating decimal. Okay? So that's the first one. The second question is to show the reverse, and that is also doable because that usually is in the syllabus. Again, I'm not sure where it is in NCERT or in the state board, but definitely by class 9, 10 it should be there. By class 9 it should be there. The second part is that any terminating decimal or any decimal which is non-terminating but repeating is a rational number. Okay, so part one is going from rational number, proving that they can be expressed as either terminating or non-terminating but repeating. That's part one. The second part is going from the decimal representations, which are either terminating or recurring, and to show that they have to be rational. Okay, so try to get both these proofs. They are not very different, very difficult. The first one, all of you should get. Okay, it requires a level of logic that a class 6 student should be able to handle. Okay, so try it out. And anytime, anywhere you see a child who is capable of doing, who is interested in math and is capable of, mathematical reasoning, etc., these kind of questions you can give him or her to, give them more food for thought. Because what happens is, oftentimes we absolutely need to focus on children who are having difficulty. But in doing so, we often miss out on those who are getting bored. Okay, and so we do need to have identify them and kind of give them something more difficult to sink their teeth into. Okay, so that's it from my end today. I'm now going to turn off the video. So any question, comment, anything? Okay, so Madhavan, because you joined a bit late, there is one homework that we had given, and you may not be aware of it. That is to take a
Yes,
look at.
Madhavan and Saravanan who joined.
Huh?
There's Saravanan Musami. He used to work with us from another school. He has joined the session also.
Okay, so basically, okay, I'm going to assign this to Sundar. Sundar, just make sure Madhavan knows the word problem task, what he has to do. So forward him the emails, etc., and get him up to speed with what we have done so far.
Yeah.
Okay. So most of you have wrote back with the word problem stuff. Vasant had a very interesting observation, and I'm kind of happy to see that. So his observation is that NCERT textbook doesn't have any problem for word problem for rational numbers. Makes sense. I mean, it's more for a mathematical need and not to cater to real life situations. So happy about it, that they didn't force it. Okay, so see you on Saturday, and I mean, every week you are taking classes, etc. So if you have any question, any issues regarding those, please do share them. Okay, and I think it's okay to share with everybody, but if you are feeling too shy to share it with everybody, email it to me. Okay. This is the thing about adult learning. You learn how much you want to learn. And beyond the point, I'm not going to force you or anything. With children, young children, yes, there you have more responsibility. But as they grow older, the sooner the better. You basically try to make them responsible for their own learning. And that has a lot of benefits, including that it makes your life easier. It's very important that children take responsibility for their own learning as soon as possible. Very, very, very important. You have all met Jayashree, right? Or you probably know about Jayashree. This is something I learned from her. She told her daughters, my job is to cook, your job is to eat. Same principle applies to students. As teacher, your job is to provide them with the experience, give them tasks, etc., provide them with all the support that they need. It's their job to learn. So you're all teaching upper primary and secondary. Secondary, you make it a point to tell them. They are going to appear for public exam. It is their exam, not your exam. Okay? Tell them right now, start telling them as much as possible. And you definitely start doing that for upper primary student also. They're old enough to handle it. Okay? Okie doke. See you all on Saturday, and hopefully Let's all hope and pray that my Wi-Fi is going to work fine.
Yeah.
Bye.
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 Thank you, Swati. Bye.